It's July 8th, 1817, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
Now, as we record today's episode, the world's tallest roller coaster, Falcon's Flight in Saudi Arabia, stands at 531 feet tall. So it may surprise you to know that over 200 years ago, today in history in 1817, a 600-footer opened in Paris, the Promenades Aériennes, the world's first modern roller coaster.
Yeah, and illustrations from the time show that rather than being the sort of steel giants that we're familiar with today, this was quite an elegant wooden structure. At its center, there was a tall tower, and riders climbed or were kind of drawn up to the top, where a small three-wheeled carriage awaited them. And once released, the vehicles kind of plunged down these two wooden tracks that curved their way through the gardens that they were sitting in. And unlike the sleds and slides that had come before them, these carriages ran on rails and were physically attached to them. So the sensation would have been really astonishing for first-time riders, but it must be said they look a bit pathetic to our contemporary eyes, having seen all the roller coasters that have come since.
It's elegant, isn't it? It's not necessarily thrilling, but it looks like it would be, a lovely way to see the park, because this was happening in Parc Beaujon in Paris, which is it was a 30-acre estate near the Champs-Élysées that had been built for a wealthy banker. It was built in 1801 by an entrepreneur called Francois Koopman, who had the vision to transform it into a pleasure garden, which was still a relatively new concept. It was gaining traction among the growing middle classes. And to add the wow factor, he enlisted Michel Ruggieri. And at that time, if you said the name Ruggieri, everyone in France would understand you meant the Ruggieri brothers, who were synonymous in France with fireworks. That was the family firm. And Michel was, in fact, the official pyrotechnician to the court of Louis XVIII. And in fact, Louis XVIII turned up to the park, although really upsettingly, we don't have any confirmation as to whether or not he actually braved the ride. You'd like to think he would. It'd be a bit of a damp squib if the monarch wouldn't get on the ride, but you can see why there might be misgivings about sending him careening down 600 feet of wooden rail.
Or just actually sort of ascending to the top to ride it, because, if you think queues are long these days, you had to walk up a set of stairs to ride the bench down, and then you're only going down with gravity, right? There's no other mechanism. So you then have to wait for the whole thing to be hoisted back up again manually. And ultimately, it was those steps that were the issue. I mean, everyone wanted to ride it once, but, they didn't want to climb the steps to do it again. I mean, they had pit stops en route, so you could stop and have a coffee while doing the climb. I mean, A, yes, Paris. But also, B, bear in mind, ladies would be wearing their full 18 teens ensembles with umbrellas, etc. And it's July, it's hot. So, I mean, you're going to want to stop on the way up. You're not going to want to do it again once you've done it, not least because the ride itself, even though very slow by modern standards, because of the lack of safety precautions, sounded terrifying. You had to hold on to the sides to stop yourself falling out. There were no restraints. There were no seat dividers. Everyone just gets piled up on top of each other.
Oh, my goodness.
But a lot of what we see in roller coasters these days, and this is why I said in my introduction, the first modern roller coaster, we'll get into what existed pre this in a minute, but a lot of what we see these days was present and correct here. Mainly wheeled cars securely locked to the track, guide rails to keep them on course, at least a consistent ride every time you went on it.
Yeah, but even so, Parc Beaujon, the pleasure garden, struggled financially and actually ended up closing in 1824, so 7 years after this day. And the year after, the land was sold off and soon developed into housing. And it seems like the Promenades Aériennes were, in all likelihood, a victim of their own success, because it was so popular and so novel that imitators soon sprung up all over the city. Now, this was called Montagnes Russes, like Russian mountains. So these all over Paris, you had the Swiss mountains, the American mountains, and somewhat more improbably, the Egyptian mountains. So it seems likely that early coaster heads were drawn to these newer, more ambitious, more thrilling rides.
Yeah, and it's these Russian mountains, the way that the roller coaster story actually begins over in Russia. Well, these were thrill rides that they called Katalnaya Gorka, which literally translates to sliding mountain or sliding hill. They were enormous artificial hills, sometimes more than 20 meters high, constructed from timber, but crucially covered with ice during winter. And so riders sat in sleds and then shot down these steep frozen slopes at really quite alarming speeds. But Catherine the Great was so fond of these things that summer versions were then created at her estate outside St. Petersburg.
Take that, French emperors.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it so much I have it in my house.
Again, no documents about whether she went on it, but I'm sure she actually did. But these things largely depended on winter conditions, and riders were not securely attached to any track. And so a sled really could bounce or skid or simply leave a course altogether. So that innovation of actually attaching the carts to the track was also a bit of an early safety precaution.
Yeah, the thrill became, as it is now, the imaginative leap of imagine what would happen if this went wrong, as opposed to I am actually concerned I'm going to die. And inevitably, the sort of locked cars design then made an impression on thrill seekers around the world, and similar things got incorporated into all the big, fun fairs and sort of proto-theme parks. Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, often called the world's first theme park because it was aimed at families rather than grown-ups. And the strange thing about these sort of pleasure gardens is they were sort of where you might take a lover, because there was this element of like different social classes mixing. There were even like darkened areas where you could have a tryst. So, there was always that sort of slightly seedy side, whereas Tivoli was for families, and they had a similar roller coaster by 1845, which essentially kind of in the principle of the design doesn't change that much until the first tubular steel coaster, which is the Matterhorn in Disneyland in 1959,
wow.
Which is, of course, a tribute to, the Icy Hills Russian thing, right? That's what the theme is. So, I mean, in a way, they didn't really change for like 150 years. But along the way, there were innovations, inversions, loops, etc., which kind of built up what we know now.
Yeah, in 1846, Paris again was at the forefront of roller coaster development by introducing the first roller coaster with a loop. This one was only 4 meters across, but I mean, riding on it must have been an absolute trip. You already felt like you were going to fall out when it was going down a hill. I mean, going upside down, I assume you just clung to the bottom of the cart and hoped for the best. But by this time, roller coasters of a kind were also emerging in the US, and it had such an interesting start. So many things that we do about the US end up having a connection to railways. So the first thing that approaches a roller coaster in the US were a money-making scheme by railway companies to use up mostly freight trains, but also sometimes passenger trains that weren't in service. They would sell tickets specifically for a sloping stretch of track to thrill seekers. Lots of people hadn't been on a train, and they called this the Gravity Railroad because they weren't going to spend any extra money in powering it. So they would literally just run it down a slope. People would get on, say, wow, fantastic. And that was kind of a roller coaster. And that was sort of the first ones in the US, although obviously the US would later come to be, sort of testing ground for experimental roller coasters.
But you're right, Rebecca, that like the first sort of purpose-built roller coasters built on that very idea of kind of runaway train carts.
That's still a trope now, isn't it? The runaway mine train.
True.
Literally, rides called that still.
I suppose because they are kind of a train on a track that is being dropped and let go to gravity. Like that is what they are. And that's certainly the idea of a chap named Lamarcus Adner Thompson, who opened the first purpose-built roller coaster, which was called the Switchback Railway at Coney Island in 1884. And, it kind of may be hard to believe now that we have so many roller coasters with names like Dead, Devil Dive, and Steel Vengeance and the Beast and so on. But the rides that he developed were meant to be a distraction from Satan's temptations. Thompson, was disgusted with the rise of kind of hedonistic amusements like saloons and brothels and so on. And so he invented roller coasters.
So he participated in the creation of Coney Island. That's right.
Yeah, that'll solve it.
It sort of reminded me, do you remember when we did the episode about Dr. Kellogg and how he didn't want his cereal to be too exciting? It's a little bit like that. He didn't want the ride. Like, the ride could have been more thrilling. They had loop-de-loops in France at this time, but it was billed as a scenic railroad. It wasn't billed as a thrilling railroad. And so the Coney Island one made sense. You could look out around Coney Island. But when they built others, they started building, they built one in Atlantic City. They built a few more around Coney Island. And because sumptuous scenery wasn't always guaranteed, the tracks would sometimes be enclosed by a tunnel with panels that would depict sort of like scenes from the Swiss Alps or something, so that you could, remain in that scenic railroad mindset. But obviously the demand for more intense thrills soon became clear, and by the 1890s, places like Coney Island and Atlantic City were home to what we might recognise as more modern roller coasters. They got the death-defying loops, and actually, on the note of death-defying, you may well be having some thoughts and feelings about the safety of some of these contraptions.
Yes.
The first American looping coaster, the Flip-Flap Railway on Coney Island.
Flick-flack. Flick-flap.
Yeah, the flip-flap.
Flip-flap. Flip-flap.
Flip-flap
Okay,
railway.
I think names have
yeah.
got better as Arians.
The names have got better. The
Menace
test
and
names
stuff
got
like that.
better. I mean, this one,
Flip-flap.
they loaded it up with monkeys before they allowed
okay.
humans to board. But that was considered, obviously, cutting-edge, humane technology at the time.
I suppose monkeys went to space first.
I mean, they were actually pioneers on a lot of fronts, it turns out. Back in those days, it was basically monkeys or orphans who we were tested with.
Now they'll take whoever will pay for a fast pass.
To hear more from us on this topic, join Club Retrospectors now. Unlock our weekly bonus bits at patreon.com/retrospectors.